Hey guys, this is Slacker back with another video, this time talking to you guys about 10 tips for getting better at League of Legends. These tips will help anyone in any rank, and if you take these tips and implement them to your game, you will play more consistent as well as getting closer to reaching your desired rank or goal. So, tip number 1 is narrowing down your champion pool. I personally narrowed it down to 2 champions, and then when I got to a high enough rank, I expanded it to 4 champions. And then you can gradually expand it even more. So the reasoning for this is that once you get to know your champion, you know their strong points and their weak points, who they can duel, who they can't, what their purpose is in team fights, then you'll start to focus more on learning the actual game. And then if you have to learn every single champion, if you play like, let's say 30 champions, you have to learn all these champions before you can actually start learning the game. It's going to take you a very long time. So this is why you just narrow it down to 2 or 3 champions and maybe 1 champion for your off role, and then you can start focusing more on learning the game and implementing some of these other tips for the game. Tip number 2 is allowing yourself to get carried. So this is a difficult one. I actually had a hard time with it at some point, but this tip is very important. You have to bleed as little as possible when you're in a losing lane, and this can be hard because you can start tilting and stuff, but if you try not to tilt your winning lanes and you just try to bleed as little as possible, listen to what they have to say, because they might be better players, so they actually might have some constructive stuff, and try not to be toxic in the chat, and just focus on, okay, how do I bleed as little as possible so to give my winning lanes the biggest chance of carrying. This is a very important mentality, because not all games you're going to be doing good, but if you stop your feeding, then you will actually allow the other players on your team to actually carry you in some instances. This is getting right into my point number 3. Do not be a toxic player. This also often happens if you are losing. You start tilting the jungler or the mid laner for not roaming. And this is also if you're a winning lane, don't tilt your losing lanes, because they might start being toxic right back at you. So it's just toxicity, it spreads like a plague. It's not good. Do not be a toxic player, and it can also get you banned and into other trouble. So there's just no positives to it. So if you know that you get toxic, mute people. This I wouldn't recommend for higher elos. You should really learn to deal with being toxic by not necessarily muting people, but by just ignoring it instead, because sometimes constructive stuff might come up in chat, and important stuff for how you win the game might actually come up in the chat. Going into point number 4. Yes, and this is watch professional players. Professional players, not so much when they play on their competitive play, even though you can learn a lot by that, but if they have an off day and they stream, they will typically teach a lot of stuff by talking while they're playing, and you can learn a lot from professional players. All these small things that makes the difference between being a professional player and being a very good player. So this tip is more for higher elos, how you go from being a good player to being a really good player. Lower elo players can still watch professional players and actually learn something from it, but this is more a tip for higher elos, how to get to the very high elo. So the next tip on the list is tip number 5, and it is learn proper jungling routes. So this one goes out to the junglers, of course, most. I see so many junglers in the lower elos who waffle around, and this makes you actually lose a lot of experience and potential ganks and stuff. So you need to learn the proper jungling routes for each champion, what their strong points and weak points are, if they're good at AoE clears, and then you also have to manage your jungling routes after what lanes are winning and losing. So but just the starting jungling route should be the one that you go on when the game starts is very important, just to learn a proper one of these for the champion that you're playing. So this one you can learn from going to watch professional players. I'll also have a video out on some of the jungling routes soon, but this tip was mostly for the junglers. Okay, into the next tip. This is the tip: learn when your champion is strong and weak. This is so important, and my first tip, narrowing down your champion pool. This one, of course, narrowing down your champion pool will make this a lot easier. And I don't mean, learning which abilities do what. I mean, learning which champions can do which champions and who is stronger and what level. Let's say you're a Camille and you're trying to go down and take the Scuttle Crab at level 2 and you meet Deadly Sin. Can you beat him? Can you not beat him? This is only something you learn by playing a lot of games. So, and that takes me right into my next tip, is the game play more. You won't rank up by playing a game or a week, or at least it'll take you a few years. So play more games. This tip is just, it explains itself pretty much. You don't have to play 100 games a week or something, but you have to play more than what would be the equivalent to a game a day. You have to play probably 20 games a week plus to rank up at a decent pace. So this one was pretty self-explanatory, but it takes me right into my next tip, which is take breaks. Okay, so it will also, in my experience, it is a lot easier to rank up if you, let's say, you play like 3 games a day, 7 days a week. This is just an example. So that will take you to 21 games a week. This is a lot better than you playing 11 games on Saturday and 10 games on Sunday. Because when you get into the getting into the winning streaks and maintaining your winning streaks is a good thing, but it is not as easy as getting on a losing streak and maintaining the losing streak. So don't get into this bad habit. So as soon as you lose a few games in a row, I'd say 3 games probably, you should stop and take a break. And I do not mean a 5-minute break. It's a break for at least half an hour. Sometimes if I lose 3 games in the morning, in a weekend, I'll come back at the evening. If I start losing again, I'll just take a break for the rest of the day, maybe the rest of the weekend. So this tip is very important, because for not just losing all of your elo just by being on a bad streak. And this tip number 9 is learning how to manage the lane. Okay, so basically this tip is for every other role than the jungler pretty most, and also the support a little bit. So learn how to manage the lane. When can you freeze waves? When do you have to push? Does the enemy top laner have TP? So I need to care if I'm a bot lane. And this is just very important. When do I have to push the wave into the opposing tower? So, and how do I set a lane up for ganks? This is also very important, not to have too big a wave crashing into you. Your jungler is ganking. Managing the lane is very, very important, because you can set somebody off the game. You can win a lane basically by just managing the lane properly and them not knowing what to do. If they don't know how to break a freeze, you'll start winning the lane a lot more, and that will of course lead you to win a lot more games. And the last tip is learn macro play. Learn what macro play is. So basically, if you learn when to take Baron, if the opposing team is on the other side of the map, play the map a lot more. If you see 5 enemies bot lane, then go Baron. If you can, if it's up and you can take it, and you see 5 enemies on the opposite side of the map, just care that they aren't winning the game. If you see, okay, they just did a 4-man dive bot, you can't go down there and do anything, well, then take the mid tower if you're a mid laner, or take Rift Herald if you're a jungler. So, not just bleeding, but punishing them, even if it's not a good trade, but you can narrow your losses that way. So, that was all for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching till the end, and see you next time.